standing in my son's $4.2 million La Jolla home, wearing a dress I'd been told was too fancy for a woman my age, I heard my daughter-in-law Sophia announce to 40 guests, "We've decided Eleanor will be more comfortable at the hotel. The family table is full." The champagne flute in my hand didn't tremble. 32 years as a Marine Corps officer had trained that reflex out of me. What they couldn't train out was the sharp, clean cut of humiliation sliding between my ribs like a bayonet. Precise, surgical, designed to wound without leaving a visible mark. 40 faces turned toward me in the sudden quiet. Some looked away. Others offered the kind of pitying smiles reserved for elderly relatives who have overstayed their welcome at events they were never truly invited to. Not one person spoke up. Not one questioned why Marcus's mother, the woman who'd raised him alone after his father died, who'd flown across the country for this engagement party, was being politely erased from her own son's celebration. Marcus stood beside Sophia in the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Pacific, his dress whites immaculate, his face carefully blank. Our eyes met for half a second before he looked down at the imported Italian marble beneath his polished shoes. That micro-moment of cowardice hurt worse than Sophia's announcement. My expression remained neutral, not the trembling acknowledgement of someone who'd just been slapped in public, but the composed, gracious response I'd perfected over 3 decades of military dinners, where junior officers' wives tried to establish pecking order through 1,000 tiny cuts. "Of course, Sophia. How thoughtful of you to consider my comfort." The relief on her face was immediate and genuine. She'd expected resistance, maybe tears. Instead, I'd given her exactly what she wanted, my complicit silence in my own erasure. "I knew you'd understand. You're always so gracious, Eleanor." I stayed until the end, maintained composure through the toasts, congratulated the happy couple, shook hands with Sophia's parents who couldn't quite meet my eyes, hugged the few military colleagues of Marcus's who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with what had just happened, but said nothing. Silence is contagious in social settings. One person's cowardice gives everyone else permission to look away. The drive back to my own La Jolla home took 11 minutes, long enough for the facade to crack, not long enough for the tears. Those would wait until I was safely behind walls no one could see through. My house sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, $3.8 million of California coastal real, a state that Benjamin and I had bought 23 years ago when it was only 1.2. We'd scraped together the down payment, convinced we were being reckless. "An investment in our future," Benjamin had said, his pilot's confidence unshakable even about things that had nothing to do with flying. Now it was just mine. Had been for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. I kicked off the shoes Sophia had called too fancy. Ferragamo pumps I'd bought in 1998, back when quality meant something lasted decades instead of seasons. Poured myself 2 fingers of the Macallan 18 Benjamin used to save for promotions and victories. Stood at the window watching moonlight silver the dark water below. What they didn't know, what Sophia and Marcus and all 40 witnesses to my public dismissal didn't know, was that the woman they'd just shoved into a corner owned assets worth $47 million. And I was about to teach them the most expensive lesson of their entitled lives. But that night, alone in the house that suddenly felt cavernous without Benjamin's presence to fill it, I let myself feel the wound. Just for a moment. Just enough to remember why silence, when chosen strategically, carried more power than any scream. 3 years earlier, August 2021, I'd sat in the same living room while a Navy chaplain explained how quickly a brain hemorrhage could steal a man from the sky. Benjamin had been running a routine training exercise over the Mojave. 60 years old, perfect health, passed his flight physical 2 months prior. The human body, the chaplain said gently, doesn't always give warnings before it gives up. Marcus had flown in from Norfolk within 6 hours. held my hand through the memorial service at Miramar, gave the eulogy that made 300 active-duty Marines cry, stood beside me while they folded the flag with crisp, ceremonial precision, and handed it to me with words I barely heard through the roaring silence in my head. "Mom, I'm here. Whatever you need. Dad would want you to know you're not alone." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. Benjamin's lawyer read the will in this same living room 1 week later. Marcus sat beside me on the leather sofa Benjamin had picked out because it was tactically sound. His military speak for furniture that could survive decades without wearing out. The house to Eleanor. The investment portfolio worth $2.1 million to Eleanor. The life insurance, $800,000 to Eleanor. A $500,000 scholarship fund for young Marines pursuing higher education. Established in Benjamin's name, administered by Eleanor. For Marcus, his father's Rolex Submariner, the hunting rifle they'd used together in Montana, and $50,000 in cash. Marcus wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "Mom, you deserve all of it. Dad would want you to enjoy life. Travel. Do all the things you put off while he was flying missions and you were running intelligence operations." The distribution wasn't about money. Benjamin and I had built our wealth together, 2 lieutenant colonels who'd made smart investments and lived below our means for 30 years. Marcus had his own Navy salary, his own career, his own life. The will reflected partnership, not favoritism. But now, sitting in the dark 3 years later with Sophia's dismissal still stinging, I wondered if that $50,000 had planted a seed of resentment. If watching his mother inherit everything while he got tokens, however sentimental, had created a wound I'd been too grief-blind to notice. Or maybe it hadn't been about the inheritance at all. Maybe it started 6 months after Benjamin's funeral, at a medical conference in San Diego, when Marcus met a 29-year-old plastic surgeon with a practice to build and a lifestyle to fund. I met Sophia for the first time in February 2022, 6 months after I became a widow. Marcus brought her to dinner at my house. "Just something casual, Mom. I want you two to meet." And I spent 3 hours preparing casual. Grilled sea bass, roasted vegetables, a salad with blood oranges because I remembered Marcus loved them as a child. Set the table with the good china, the Waterford crystal Benjamin, and I received as a wedding gift in 1992, still perfect after 30 years of careful handling. Sophia arrived in a white Range Rover that looked fresh off the lot, wearing Louboutins that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Stunning in the way women are when they make beauty a full-time occupation. Perfect highlights, perfect contouring, perfect smile that showed exactly enough teeth to seem warm without being threatening. She hugged me like we were already family, called me Eleanor instead of Mrs. Hayes, and immediately began a tour of my home without being invited. What a beautiful place. Benjamin had excellent taste. Not we, not you and Benjamin, just Benjamin. As if I'd been a passenger in my own life, decorating decisions handed down to me by the man who actually paid for everything. "We chose it together," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "The view sold us. Benjamin loved watching the sunset after long days at Miramar." Sophia moved through the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, her gaze cataloging every detail with the kind of assessment that makes auction house appraisers rich. When she reached the deck overlooking the ocean, she stood at the railing for a long moment, the Pacific spreading before her in darkening shades of blue and gold. "You must rattle around in here all alone." The words landed soft, sympathetic. Concern from a young woman who couldn't possibly understand what it meant to live in a house haunted by 32 years of marriage. But underneath the sympathy, I heard something else. Calculation. The kind of mental arithmetic people do when they're pricing real estate they don't own yet. I manage quite well. We ate dinner on the deck, Marcus pouring wine and talking about his latest deployment to the Persian Gulf, Sophia laughing at his stories and touching his arm with the casual ownership of someone who'd already decided he belonged to her. She asked intelligent questions about military life. How long were deployments? How did families cope? What happened if you got injured overseas? And I watched my son light up under her attention. I'd always known Marcus would marry someone. Hoped for it, even. Benjamin and I used to wonder what kind of woman would capture our serious, dedicated, sometimes emotionally guarded son. I'd imagined someone kind. Someone who'd challenge him intellectually. Someone who understood that military families required spines made of flexible steel, strong enough to hold up under pressure, resilient enough not to snap. Sophia seemed kind that night, seemed interested, seemed like she might be exactly what Marcus needed after years of putting his career before relationships. It wasn't until she stood to leave, kissing my cheek with warmth that felt practiced rather than genuine, that I saw the flash of something harder in her eyes. We should do this again soon, maybe next time at our place. Their place. They'd been dating 9 months. Marcus still lived in base housing at Camp Pendleton. My face remained pleasant as I hugged my son and waved as the white Range Rover pulled away from my driveway. Then I stood at the kitchen sink washing Waterford Crystal by hand, because some things shouldn't go in the dishwasher, no matter how modern the machine, and wondered why the back of my neck prickled with the same instinct that used to warn me when intelligence reports didn't quite add up. They got engaged 3 months later. Marcus called on a Saturday morning, while I was having coffee on the deck, watching pelicans dive into the surf, with the kind of precision that comes from a million years of evolutionary practice. "Mom, I have news." The happiness in his voice lifted my spirits despite the too-fast timeline. "Tell me." "I asked Sophia to marry me last night. She said yes." "Marcus, that's wonderful. Congratulations, sweetheart." "I know it's quick, but when you know, you know. Dad used to say that, right? That he knew the day he met you that you were it for him." Benjamin had said that, often, usually while pulling me close during moments when military life threatened to separate us again. I'd never been entirely sure if he meant it, or if it was the kind of romantic mythology couples build to make arbitrary timing feel like destiny. But it had been a nice story to tell ourselves. He did say that. "So you understand. Will you help us plan the engagement party? Sophia wants something elegant but not too formal. She's thinking our place. Well, my place, but she's moving in next month and maybe 60 people. Family, close friends, some of her colleagues from the practice. Our place, moving in, 60 people." The engagement was less than 12 hours old, and already she was rewriting possession. "Of course I'll help, whatever you need." "Actually, Sophia suggested maybe hosting it at your house. The view is better, you've got more space, and you're so good at entertaining." She'd handle the planning, obviously just thought the location might be perfect. The request was reasonable. My house was bigger, the setting more dramatic. I'd hosted dozens of military functions here over the years, promotion parties, retirement dinners, memorial gatherings after deployments that didn't end the way anyone hoped. But something in the way Marcus phrased it, Sophia's suggestion, Sophia's planning, my house offered up like a venue rental, made that neck prickle intensify. "When were you thinking?" 3 weeks. I know that's fast, but Sophia wants to do it before my next deployment cycle starts. 3 weeks to plan a party for 60 people, in my home, for a woman I'd met exactly once. "I'll make it work." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Sophia's going to be so excited." After we hung up, I sat watching the pelicans for another hour. Watched them circle, dive, surface with silver fish flashing in their beaks. Efficient, purposeful, every movement serving survival. I'd spent 30 years in military intelligence analyzing patterns, spotting inconsistencies, recognizing when surface narratives concealed deeper agendas. The skill didn't turn off just because I'd retired. Just because the target was my son's fiancé instead of hostile foreign actors. But marriages were built on trust, and I'd taught Marcus to choose his battles. If Sophia made him happy, if she challenged him, supported him, loved him the way Benjamin had loved me, then the rest was noise I needed to ignore. So I buried the instinct, opened my laptop, started planning an engagement party that would prove I could be gracious, welcoming, unconditionally supportive of my son's choices. 3 weeks later, I learned exactly how much unconditional support Sophia expected from the woman she was already learning to dismiss. I spent $8,000 I didn't need to spend making my home perfect for strangers who would barely notice. Maine lobster shipped overnight from Portland. Champagne, Veuve Clicquot, because Sophia mentioned once she'd had it at a medical conference and loved it. Flowers everywhere, white roses and peonies filling crystal vases in every room because Sophia's Pinterest board featured endless images of white floral arrangements, and I was trying, damn it, I was trying to make her feel welcomed into our family. The caterer arrived at noon, the florist at 1. By 3, my house looked like something from a magazine spread about California coastal elegance, which was the point, which was what I'd aimed for, which was me proving I understood how to honor my son's happiness even when something cold and analytical in my brain kept whispering that the numbers didn't add up. I dressed carefully. Navy Chanel suit I'd bought in San Francisco 6 years ago for Benjamin's promotion to full colonel. Pearls. Low heels. Hair professionally styled that morning at a salon in La Jolla Village, where women my age got blowouts that lasted 3 days if you slept carefully and didn't exercise too hard. Sophia arrived early with a woman she introduced as her wedding planner. For an engagement party. They swept through my house with clipboards and measuring tapes, rearranging furniture I'd already arranged, moving floral centerpieces 3 inches to the left for reasons that apparently mattered deeply to people who did this professionally. Eleanor, this is beautiful. Really. Though I probably would have chosen peonies over roses, but that's just personal preference. The peonies were there. 3 massive arrangements flanking the main ones. I'd called 4 florists before finding someone who had them in late May. I'm glad you like it. And about this afternoon, we need to discuss seating. We were standing in the living room. Guests would arrive in 90 minutes. The caterer was setting up the bar. The pianist was tuning the baby grand Benjamin, and I bought in 1995 when we decided music should fill the silence of the house more often. What about it? Sophia glanced toward the kitchen, where the wedding planner was directing staff. Lowered her voice to the tone people use for delivering bad news they're pretending is good news. The family table, Marcus's family, my parents, my brother. We've carefully curated the dynamics. And with your energy, we think you'd be more comfortable at the hotel. The words took 3 seconds to fully penetrate. I heard them, processed them, ran them through every possible interpretation to see if there was one that didn't mean what I thought they meant. There wasn't. I'm Marcus's mother. Exactly, and we want you comfortable, not stressed trying to keep up with conversation. The hotel has an excellent restaurant. You'll love it. She offered a warm smile because she actually believed she was doing me a favor, relieving me of the burden of attending my son's engagement party in my own home after I'd spent 3 weeks and $8,000 making sure everything was perfect. Sophia. Oh, good, you understand. I knew you would. You're always so gracious about these things." She turned and walked away before I could finish the sentence. Before I could explain that understanding was not the same as agreeing. Before I could ask what curated dynamics meant and why my energy, whatever the hell that meant, was incompatible with celebrating my own son's engagement. I stood in my living room surrounded by flowers I'd chosen, food I'd ordered, champagne I'd paid for, and felt the careful composure I'd spent 58 years building start to crack. 30 minutes later, the first guests arrived. By 4, the house was full of voices and laughter. Marcus stood near the piano, Sophia radiant beside him, her hand resting on his arm with the casual possessiveness of someone who'd already decided what belonged to her. I circulated, maintained a pleasant demeanor, played hostess in my own home to people who'd been invited by someone else, made small talk with Sophia's colleagues from her plastic surgery practice, young, ambitious doctors who discussed Brazilian butt lifts and facial fillers with the clinical detachment of mechanics describing engine repairs. At 4:30, Sophia stood near the windows overlooking the Pacific and raised her champagne flute. The room quieted. All 40 guests turned to listen. "Everyone, thank you so much for being here today. Marcus and I are overwhelmed by your love and support." Applause, bright faces. Someone called out congratulations. Before we continue celebrating, I need to make a small announcement. There's been a tiny change to this evening's dinner plans. My stomach dropped. We've decided Eleanor will be more comfortable celebrating at her hotel. The family table is carefully balanced, and we want everyone to enjoy their best experience. Silence, 40 faces turning toward me with expressions ranging from pity to embarrassment to careful neutrality. Not one person spoke. Not one said, "Wait, this is Eleanor's house." Not one pointed out the obvious cruelty of announcing someone's exclusion in their own home after they'd spent weeks preparing for your celebration. Marcus looked at the floor. That was the moment I understood. Not just that Sophia was cruel, I'd already suspected that. But that Marcus was weak. That my son, who I'd raised to stand up for what was right even when it was hard, who'd been taught since childhood that honor meant protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, was choosing his fiancée's comfort over his mother's dignity. Every eye in the room waited to see how I'd respond. The widow whose energy wasn't compatible with curated dynamics, the mother being gently erased from her son's new life. I kept my face neutral. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than Benjamin's funeral. Harder than the moment they told me he was gone. Because this required choice. Required swallowing humiliation and shame and presenting a face that said none of this mattered, none of this hurt. I understood perfectly and harbored no resentment whatsoever. "Of course, Sophia. How thoughtful of you to consider my comfort." The relief in the room was palpable. Crisis averted. Eleanor was gracious, just like Sophia said. No scene, no tears, no awkward confrontation that would ruin the elegant afternoon everyone came here to enjoy. I stayed until the end, hugged Marcus goodbye. He couldn't quite meet my eyes but mumbled something about calling me tomorrow. Kissed Sophia's cheek. Thanked guests for coming as if I'd actually been part of the celebration instead of the help being dismissed once the work was done. Drove home 11 minutes through La Jolla traffic, while the sun set over the Pacific in shades of gold and red that would have been beautiful if I could see anything through the rage. That night, I didn't cry, didn't call friends, didn't pour myself the bourbon that would have made everything softer and blurrier and easier to ignore. Instead, I went to Benjamin's study, the room I'd barely touched in 3 years because changing anything felt like erasing him further, and opened the safe behind his bronze star citation. Inside are financial records, investment statements, property deeds, insurance policies, All the boring paperwork of a life built slowly and carefully over 3 decades of military service. I spread everything across his mahogany desk and started calculating. The La Jala house, purchased for $1.2 million in 2001, now worth $4.7 million according to the last property assessment. Investment portfolio, $2.1 million when Benjamin died, now $2.8 million after 3 years of careful management. Savings, $950,000 in various accounts. Life insurance, $800,000 already paid out and invested. Total visible assets, $8.45 million. But that wasn't everything. When I retired from the Marines as a lieutenant colonel 5 years ago, I'd started Hayes Strategic Consulting, a defense contracting firm that analyzed intelligence operations for private military companies. Small operation, just me and 2 junior analysts working from the converted garage Benjamin had insisted I didn't need until I proved him wrong. I'd kept it quiet. Didn't tell Marcus because I didn't want him worrying his mother was working too hard. Didn't advertise because defense contracting operates better in shadows than spotlights. Built the client base slowly, carefully, one recommendation at a time from former colleagues who knew my work was meticulous and my discretion absolute. Last year's revenue, $4.2 million. Current valuation based on contracts and projected earnings, $12 million. I stared at the number until the zeros stopped looking like zeros and started looking like possibilities. Total assets, $20.45 million. $20 million Sophia knew nothing about. $20 million my son assumed didn't exist because I lived modestly, dressed conservatively, drove a 10-year-old Lexus that ran perfectly fine, so why replace it? I closed the files, locked the safe, sat in Benjamin's leather desk chair, the one that still smelled faintly like his cologne even after 3 years, and let myself feel what I'd been refusing to feel since Sophia's announcement. Not sadness, not hurt. Rage. Pure, cold, strategic rage. The kind that doesn't explode, doesn't make scenes at engagement parties or send angry texts or demand apologies that will never come. The kind that waits, watches, documents, builds a case so airtight that when the moment comes to present evidence, there's no defense, no excuse, no escape. I'd spent 30 years in intelligence, knew how to gather information without being noticed, knew how to identify patterns, spot inconsistencies, recognize when people's surface stories didn't match their underlying agendas. Sophia thought I was someone she could dismiss without consequence. She was wrong. But being underestimated didn't mean powerless. It meant I could move through their lives unnoticed while they revealed exactly who they were when they thought no one important was watching. The next morning, I called Grace Chen. Grace was 29 years old, sharp as broken glass, and the closest thing I had to a daughter. Her mother, Rachel, had been my roommate at officer candidate school in 1986, 2 women trying to survive in a Marine Corps that barely wanted us there. We'd stayed friends through 30 years of deployments and transfers, and the particular loneliness of military marriages where your spouse is gone more than their home. Rachel died of ovarian cancer in 2019, 6 weeks after diagnosis. Benjamin and I flew to San Francisco for the funeral, held Grace, while she sobbed through a grief so fresh and raw it felt like watching someone bleed out in real time. Before she died, Rachel asked me to look after Grace. Not financially. The girl had a full ride to Stanford Law and a signing bonus from a top San Diego firm, but emotionally. Be the person she calls when life gets hard and her mom isn't there to answer. I'd taken the responsibility seriously, checked in monthly, took Grace to lunch whenever she needed to talk through cases or relationships, or the particular exhaustion of being a young Asian American woman in a profession still dominated by white men who thought diversity meant hiring one person who didn't look like them and calling it progress. Grace met me at a cafe in La Jolla Village, sleek and professional in a navy suit that probably cost more than mine, but wore it with the unconscious confidence of someone who'd earned every dollar herself. "Aunt Elle, you sounded stressed on the phone. Everything okay?" I told her, not emotionally, just the facts. The engagement party, the public dismissal, Marcus's silence, Sophia's casual cruelty dressed up as concern. Grace's face went from sympathetic to professionally furious in about 30 seconds. "Aunt Elle, do you have a current will?" "Benjamin's will left everything to me. It's clear." "And your will?" I hesitated. "I haven't updated since Benjamin died. Current will leaves everything to Marcus." Grace set down her coffee cup with the kind of careful control that meant she was choosing her words very, very carefully. "Change it, now, before you do anything else." "Grace, he's my son." "Who just let his fiancée humiliate you in your own home. Who stood there and said nothing while she announced your exclusion to 40 witnesses. Who's choosing her comfort over your dignity repeatedly and will continue to do so unless something forces him to wake up." She pulled out her tablet, fingers already flying across the screen. "I've seen this pattern 100 times in family law. Adult children who view aging parents as obstacles instead of people. It starts small, exclusion from events, pressure to downsize, suggestions about appropriate living situations. Then it escalates. And if something happens to you tomorrow with your current will, Sophia gets access to $20 million through Marcus. Is that what you want?" The number made me flinch. "How did you know?" "I'm your lawyer, remember? You asked me to review the LLC operating agreement last year. I know about Hayes Strategic." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I'd kept that information private for years, and now this 29-year-old woman was calmly discussing my net worth over lattes like we were planning a vacation. Grace reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "Aunt Elle, you taught me something after Mom died. You said, always know where your seat is, and if they don't offer you one, build your own table. It's time you take your own advice." The words hit like cold water. I'd said that to Grace 4 years ago when she was deciding between prestigious firms that all wanted her, but none seemed interested in making her feel welcome. Told her she didn't need their validation. Didn't need to shrink herself to fit their culture. Needed to remember her worth came from her skill, not their approval. Now my own advice was being handed back to me by the daughter of my dead best friend, and the irony tasted like shame. "What do you suggest?" Grace's expression sharpened. "First, new will. Second, we document everything. Every interaction with Sophia and Marcus, every exclusion, every attempt to pressure you about your living situation or finances. Third, we wait." "Wait for what?" "For them to show their true colors. People who see you as disposable will eventually show exactly what they want. And when they do, we'll be ready." Within a week, I had a new will. 60% to a scholarship fund for young Marines, 30% to Grace, 10% to Marcus, conditional on him completing family counseling and demonstrating, through actions, not words, that he understood why the original inheritance had been reduced. Grace established an irrevocable trust for Hayes Strategic Consulting, created a detailed file documenting every interaction with Sophia since February, started what she called contemporaneous notes, legal speak for writing down everything immediately after it happened so memory couldn't be questioned later. Silence is not absence, Aunt Elle. Silence is choice. Silence is strength dressed in satin. I'd never thought of it that way. Had always viewed my careful composure as survival mechanism rather than strategic weapon. But Grace was right. The silence that had protected me through 30 years of military politics could protect me now. Could let Sophia think she'd won while I built the case that would eventually destroy her. The first test came 13 months later, when I received an invitation that proved Grace's instincts had been absolutely correct. The envelope arrived in June 2024. Thick cream cardstock, embossed with gold lettering that screamed expensive even before I opened it. Baby shower for Sophia Hayes. Hosted by the Hayes family *. Saturday, June 15th, 2:00 p.m. Venue, Eleanor Hayes Residence, 1247 Coast Boulevard, La Jolla. They hadn't asked. Hadn't called to see if I was available. Hadn't inquired whether hosting a party for 60 people in my home was convenient or welcome or something I had any interest in facilitating. Just assumed. Because that's what disposable women do, provide space and labor while other people celebrate their own lives. I sat on the deck with the invitation, watching afternoon sun turn the Pacific into hammered gold, and felt something click into place. This was the moment Grace predicted. The escalation. The next step in Sophia's careful campaign to establish that my home, my resources, my entire existence were available for her use whenever she deemed it appropriate. I opened my laptop, emailed Grace. I spent the next 2 weeks transforming my home into a showcase for someone else's celebration. Again. $16,000 this time. Double the engagement party budget because baby showers, apparently, required pastel balloon arches imported from Lowe's Angels. Custom dessert tables designed by Instagram-famous pastry chefs, and centerpieces featuring white orchids that cost more per stem than most people spent on entire bouquets. Sophia emailed daily with updates. Never requests updates. Informing me what vendors would arrive when, which rooms needed furniture moved, how the catering setup would require exclusive access to my kitchen from noon until the event ended at 5. Grace read the emails over lunch at a bistro in Del Mar, her attorney face firmly in place. She's not even pretending anymore. Look at this one, Eleanor. Please ensure the downstairs powder room is stocked with luxury hand soap and rolled hand towels. The drugstore variety won't do for our guests. Our guests, in my house, using my bathroom, with luxury soap I was expected to provide. Document everything, Grace reminded me for the 15th time. Every email, every expense, every assumption that your home and resources exist for her convenience. I photographed receipts, saved correspondence, built a file that grew thicker each day with evidence of what Grace called financial exploitation masked as family obligation. The morning of June 15th arrived with cloudless skies and temperatures already climbing toward 80 by 9 a.m. I dressed in ivory linen. Elegant, age-appropriate, expensive enough that no one could accuse me of not making an effort, but understated enough that I wouldn't outshine the mother-to-be. Sophia arrived at 11 with her event coordinator, a tiny woman named Christina who carried an iPad and radiated the kind of controlled panic that comes from managing rich people's unrealistic expectations. They walked through my home with the casual authority of people who'd already decided they owned it, moved the Eames chair Benjamin and I bought in Paris, relocated the coffee table his father built by hand in 1967, stacked my books, first editions, some of them, collected over 40 years, in corners to make room for gift displays. Eleanor's you look lovely, very appropriate. Appropriate. The word landed like a paper cut, small, sharp, designed to sting without drawing visible blood. Thank you, Sophia. You're glowing. She was. 8 months pregnant looked good on her. That annoying kind of good where women somehow become more beautiful instead of exhausted. Designer maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. Hair professionally styled in loose waves that took 3 hours to achieve the illusion of effortlessness. We need to discuss this afternoon's flow. Christina has prepared a timeline. The timeline appeared on the iPad screen, color-coded, down to 5-minute increments. 2:00 p.m. guest arrival, champagne service, non-alcoholic for Sophia, obviously. 2:30 p.m. seated gathering in living room for games. 3:15 p.m. dessert service and gift opening. 4:30 p.m. family photo session on the deck. 5:00 p.m. guests depart. I scanned the schedule twice, looking for my name. Found it once. 4:45 p.m. Eleanor may join family photos if time permits. May join, if time permits, family photos in my own home. This looks very organized, I managed. Sophia's face brightened. I knew you'd understand. We just want everything perfect for Benjamin Jr.'s celebration. They'd announced the name last month. Benjamin Marcus Hayes Jr. Using my dead husband's name for a child I wouldn't be allowed to help raise. A grandchild I'd see only when Sophia decided my presence was convenient rather than disruptive to her carefully curated dynamics. Christina glanced at her Apple Watch. We should position Eleanor for the event. Mrs. Hayes, you'll be in the sunroom during the main gathering. We've set up a lovely spot by the window with refreshments. The sunroom. Again. The architectural equivalent of exile. A small addition off the kitchen with garden views and exactly zero visibility to the living room where actual celebration would occur. Patricia Hayes will join you, Sophia added, as if offering me companionship softened the segregation. Marcus's grandmother flew in from North Carolina yesterday. She's 82, so the quieter space will be better for her. Patricia, Benjamin's mother. A woman who'd buried her husband 15 years ago and her son 3 years ago, and was now watching her grandson marry someone who treated family like inconvenient extras in someone else's production. I'll make sure Patricia is comfortable. Perfect. Oh, and one more thing. Marcus and I have a special announcement during the gift opening. We wanted to give you advance notice so you wouldn't be surprised. The way she said surprised made my stomach drop. What kind of announcement? You'll see. It's good news. Really good news about our future plans. She swept away before I could press further. Christina trailing behind with her iPad and her barely concealed stress, leaving me standing in my own entryway wondering what fresh hell was about to unfold. Guests began arriving at 2. 60 women in sundresses and designer sandals, carrying gifts wrapped in paper that probably cost more than the items inside. Sophia's medical colleagues, her college friends, her mother and sister-in-law and cousins who air-kissed each other and exclaimed over the decorations as if balloon arches were architectural marvels. I greeted them at the door for the first 15 minutes, muscle memory from decades of hostessing military functions, where the commanding officer's wife set the tone for entire evenings. But by 2:20, Christina gently steered me toward the sunroom. Mrs. Hayes, your mother-in-law has arrived. Perhaps you'd like to get settled. Translation: disappear before the real party starts. Patricia sat in the sunroom's wicker chair, elegant even at 82 in a pale blue dress and pearls. She'd been crying. I could tell from the careful way she'd reapplied mascara, a trick we'd both learned from decades of military funerals where you had to look composed even when your heart was shattering. Eleanor, she stood, hugged me with the fierce grip of someone who needed the contact as much as she offered it. They put us in exile. The quiet corner. Benjamin would be furious. Her voice cracked on her son's name. Even 3 years later, the grief was right there beneath the surface, waiting for moments that reminded her what she'd lost. I poured us both sparkling water from the carafe Christina's staff had left. Through the doorway, I could see into the kitchen where caterers arranged champagne flutes on silver trays. Beyond that, the living room where Sophia held court, surrounded by admirers, her hand resting on her belly in that universal gesture of pregnant women claiming attention. "What's this announcement she mentioned?" Patricia asked. She wouldn't tell me, said it was about their future plans. Nothing good, then. That girl doesn't do anything that doesn't serve her interests first. I'd never heard Patricia speak so bluntly about Sophia. She'd been polite during the engagement, gracious at the wedding I hadn't helped plan, carefully neutral during the few phone calls we'd managed since Marcus married into what Patricia once called the most self-absorbed family in Southern California. "You don't like her." "I don't trust her. There's a difference." Patricia sipped her water, watching the party unfold without us. "When Benjamin married you, I knew within 5 minutes you were right for him. The way you looked at each other, like you were already partners, already a team. But Marcus looks at Sophia like she's something beautiful and fragile he needs to protect, and she looks at him like he's useful." The assessment was so precise, so exactly what I'd been afraid to articulate, that I felt tears prick my eyes. "He loves her." Love and wisdom rarely occupy the same space, especially in young men who have been taught that providing and protecting are the same as being valued. Marcus thinks if he gives Sophia everything she wants, she'll finally see him the way he wants to be seen. He doesn't understand that some people will take everything and still want more because the taking is what they actually enjoy. From the living room, laughter erupted. Sophia had opened a gift, some enormous contraption that looked like a spacecraft designed for infants. Everyone applauded. Cameras flashed. Someone started a chant, "Speech, speech." Sophia stood, radiant in the attention, and began talking about gratitude and new beginnings, and how blessed she felt to have such amazing friends supporting this journey. Journey, as if pregnancy was a spiritual quest rather than biology. Patricia and I sat in the sunroom, 2 women watching someone else celebrate in a house that belonged to one of us, listening to platitudes about blessing and gratitude from a woman who'd never once expressed gratitude for the $16,000 worth of party she hadn't paid for. "Eleanor," Patricia's hand found mine. "Whatever she announces today, whatever she wants, you know you can say no." "Can I? She's carrying my grandchild." "She's carrying Marcus's child. Your grandchild by biology, yes. But Sophia will use that baby the same way she uses everything else, as leverage to get what she wants. And if you let her establish that leverage now, she'll use it for the next 18 years. The words settled over me like weighted silk, beautiful and suffocating, because Patricia was right. I knew she was right. Had known since the engagement party that this pattern would continue escalating unless something forced it to stop. But how do you fight your own son's wife without losing your son? How do you set boundaries without becoming the difficult mother-in-law who ruins her grandchild's family dynamics? How do you choose dignity when the cost might be permanent exile from the people you love most? Before I could find answers that didn't exist, Sophia's voice carried from the living room, bright and commanding. "Ladies, if I could have everyone's attention, Marcus and I have some exciting news to share." Patricia squeezed my hand. "Here it comes." Marcus appeared from somewhere. The kitchen, maybe, or the hallway where he'd apparently been waiting for his cue. He looked good in khakis and a button-down shirt, his naval officer posture making him seem taller than his actual 6 feet. He kissed Sophia's cheek, his hand joining hers on her belly in that couples claiming parenthood pose that always looked rehearsed in photos. "Thank you all for being here," he started, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd briefed admirals. "Sophia and I are incredibly grateful for your love and support as we prepare to welcome our son." Applause, more camera phones raised. As many of you know, we recently purchased our home in La Jolla Shores. It's beautiful, we love it, but as we've been preparing the nursery and thinking about our growing family's needs, we've realized the space might not work long-term. My chest tightened. Patricia's hand gripped mine harder. "So we've been exploring options, ways to give Benjamin Jr. the childhood he deserves, space to run, proximity to family, stability in a home with history and meaning." Sophia took over, her smile brilliant. "And we found the perfect solution. Eleanor, Marcus's mom, has been so generous, so supportive throughout this entire journey. And when we approached her about our idea, she immediately understood what we were proposing." 60 faces turned toward the sunroom, toward me. I had approached her about nothing, had understood nothing, had no idea what proposal she was about to claim I'd endorsed. "Eleanor has offered to let us move into her home." The words hit like a fist to the solar plexus. It makes perfect sense. The house is huge, 6 bedrooms, and she's been rattling around there alone since Benjamin Sr. passed. This way, she gets family around her, we get the space we need, and little Benjamin grows up in his grandfather's house, surrounded by his legacy. It's perfect for everyone. Perfect, that word again, Sophia's favorite weapon. The room erupted in applause. Women who didn't know me, didn't know my history with this house, didn't understand what was actually being announced, clapped enthusiastically for what sounded like a generous, practical solution to multiple problems. Patricia stood. Her chair scraped against tile loud enough that several guests turned. "Excuse me." Her voice cut through the applause like January wind. "Did Eleanor actually agree to this arrangement?" Sophia's smile flickered. "Of course, we discussed it last week, didn't we, Eleanor?" All 60 faces swiveled back to me, waiting, expecting confirmation of the generous offer I'd never made, the discussion that never happened, the future Sophia had just publicly announced without my knowledge or consent. This was it, the moment Grace had predicted, the escalation that would force me to either comply or reveal the truth about what was actually happening. I stood, legs steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. 3 decades of training holding me upright when everything inside wanted to collapse. "Actually, Sophia, we never had that discussion." The silence that fell was different from the engagement party silence. Sharper, heavier with the collective realization that something was very wrong. "Eleanor, don't be modest. You said you'd think about it." "I said no such thing because you never asked. What you did was mention, in passing, 3 days ago, that you and Marcus had been exploring options. You never said what those options were. You certainly never proposed moving into my home." Marcus stepped forward, confusion genuine on his face. "Mom, I thought Sophia talked to you about this. She said you were open to the idea." "When, Marcus? When did I say that? Can you tell me the specific conversation where I agreed to give up my home?" He looked at Sophia. She looked at me, and for half a second I saw calculation flicker across her face, deciding whether to double down on the lie or try a different approach. She chose manipulation disguised as concern. "Eleanor, you're confused. We talked about this at your birthday lunch last month. You mentioned the house felt too big, that you sometimes felt lonely." "I mentioned that Benjamin's absence made the house feel empty. That's not the same as inviting you to move in." But you said family was important, that you wanted to be part of Benjamin Jr.'s life. This is how that happens, Eleanor. This is us offering you the gift of daily connection with your grandson instead of occasional visits when it's convenient. The framing was masterful. She'd taken my grief about Benjamin's death, my expressed desire to be involved in my grandchild's life, and weaponized both into justification for claiming my home. And she'd done it publicly, in front of 60 witnesses, knowing that social pressure would make it nearly impossible for me to refuse without looking selfish. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated how much I'd learned over the past year about choosing dignity over compliance. Sophia, I appreciate that you want more space for your family. I understand that your current home may not meet your long-term needs, but my house is not the solution to your problem. Eleanor, please don't be selfish about this. Think about your grandson. I am thinking about my grandson. I'm thinking about what kind of example I want to set for him about boundaries, respect, and the difference between generosity and exploitation. And I'm thinking that a child deserves to grow up in a home where all the adults model healthy relationships based on mutual respect rather than unilateral demands. Patricia's soft yes from behind me felt like benediction. Marcus looked genuinely stricken. Mom, we're not demanding anything. We're asking. You're announcing, Marcus. There's a difference. Asking happens in private, with room for honest discussion and the possibility of no. Announcing happens in public, with 60 witnesses, designed to make refusal socially impossible. Sophia didn't ask me anything. She told everyone I'd agreed to something I never agreed to, counting on my silence to avoid embarrassing you in front of your friends. The mathematics of the moment shifted. Guests who'd been applauding were now looking uncomfortable. Several checked their phones, suddenly very interested in anything that didn't require eye contact. Sophia's mother whispered something to the woman beside her. Sophia's face hardened. The warmth evaporated, replaced by something colder. You're going to humiliate Marcus at his own son's baby shower. This is how you show love for your family. This is how I show love for myself. By refusing to let anyone, including family, especially family, treat my home and my resources as if they exist primarily for their convenience. I turned to Marcus, keeping my voice gentle despite the fury underneath. Sweetheart, I love you. I love that you're going to be a father. I want to be part of Benjamin Jr.'s life more than almost anything. But I will not be bullied into giving up my home to prove that love. If you need more space, there are hundreds of houses for sale in San Diego. But mine is not one of them. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Sophia like a man waiting for permission to speak. That single moment, my 35-year-old son, a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, looking to his wife for approval before responding to his own mother, broke something fundamental in me. I think, I said quietly, that this party is over, for me at least. I walked to the sunroom doorway, stopped, turned back to face the room full of women who'd come to celebrate new life and instead witnessed family implosion. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Eleanor Hayes. This is my home. I paid for this party. I spent 2 weeks preparing my house for a celebration I was told I'd be more comfortable, not fully participating in. And I just learned, simultaneously with all of you, that my presence here is contingent on allowing my son and daughter-in-law to move in and take over the space I've built a life in for 23 years. Sophia made a sound, protest or denial, hard to tell. I share this not to embarrass anyone, but to be clear about something that seems to have gotten lost. Generosity requires choice. Gratitude requires acknowledgement. And family means respect flows both ways, not just from younger to older when it's convenient and older to younger when it's demanded. I looked at Marcus. When you're ready to have a conversation with me that doesn't involve Sophia scripting your responses, you know where I live. Until then, I think we all need some space. Patricia followed me out of the sunroom, through the kitchen where caterers had frozen mid-task, past the elaborate dessert table no one had touched yet, toward the front door of my own house that I was leaving so my son and his wife could figure out how to salvage their celebration. Behind us, I heard Sophia's voice, bright and false, trying to restart the party. Well, that was unexpected. Let's not let Eleanor's confusion ruin our beautiful afternoon. Who wants cake? Patricia and I walked to her rental car in silence. Sat in the air-conditioned interior while my house, full of people celebrating my future grandchild without me, continued the party like I'd never been there at all. "Where do you want to go?" Patricia asked. "Anywhere but here." We drove to La Jolla Cove and sat on a bench watching seals bask on rocks. Tourists take photos. Life continue like my world hadn't just fractured. My phone buzzed. Text from Grace. "Aunt Elle, I'm getting reports from 3 people who were at the shower. Please tell me you're okay." Reports. Because of course Sophia's friends were already spreading their version. The difficult mother-in-law who caused a scene. The selfish widow who wouldn't share her home with her own grandchild. The confused old woman who embarrassed her son. I typed back, with Patricia, "I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than I've been in months." And realized, with something like shock, that it was true. We returned to my house at 7, long after the last guest had left. The catering company had cleaned up, packed their equipment, restored my kitchen to something approximating normal. But the living room still bore evidence of invasion. Furniture moved, my books still stacked in corners, balloon arches deflating slowly in the warm evening air. Patricia and I worked in silence, putting my home back together. Returning the Eames chair to its position by the window. Restoring Benjamin's father's coffee table to its rightful place. Reshelving books in the order I'd spent years perfecting. Around 9, I found the gift bags. 20 of them elaborate packages that guests had brought but never presented because the gift opening had apparently been canceled after my departure. Inside each, luxury baby items, designer onesies, organic cotton blankets, sterling silver rattles. Patricia picked up a bag, examined the monogrammed burp cloth inside. "Should we send these to Sophia?" Technically, they were brought to her shower. In my home, using my resources, I'm not sure whose gifts they actually are. "They're certainly not yours to keep." "No, but they're also not mine to deliver. If Sophia wants them, she can come collect them herself." I texted Marcus. "Shower gifts are in the living room. You're welcome to pick them up at your convenience." No response. Patricia stayed that night, neither of us wanting to be alone with the aftermath. We ordered Thai food, ate it on the deck watching stars emerge over the Pacific, talked about Benjamin, both Benjamins, and the particular pain of loving men who sometimes chose poorly but meant well. "He'll come around," Patricia said, meaning Marcus. "Benjamin raised him better than this. Right now Sophia's in his ear, spinning the narrative, making you the villain. But Marcus is smart. Eventually he'll see the pattern." And if he doesn't? Then you've lost a son who is already lost, but at least you'll still have yourself. The words should have felt cold. Instead, they felt like the only warm thing in a situation that had frozen solid around us. My phone buzzed, not Marcus, Grace. "Aunt Elle, we need to meet tomorrow. Morning, my office, this isn't over." Grace's office occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown San Diego high-rise, all glass and steel and views of the harbor that cost her firm approximately what I spent on the baby shower. She sat behind a desk that probably weighed more than I did, laptop open, files spread across the polished surface. "Tell me everything. Don't leave out details." I walked her through it. The announcement, the fabricated conversation, my refusal, the aftermath. Grace took notes, her fingers flying across her keyboard with the kind of speed that came from law school training and trial preparation. When I finished, she sat back, steepled her fingers, and allowed herself a small smile. "Aunt Elle, you just gave me everything I need." "For what?" "For ending this, permanently." She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen, a spreadsheet, columns of dates, incidents, witnesses, financial calculations. "This is 18 months of documentation. Every exclusion, every financial exploitation, every public humiliation. I've been building this file since our lunch after the engagement party, adding every piece of evidence you've provided." The spreadsheet was color-coded. Red for incidents with witnesses, yellow for financial exploitation, blue for emotional manipulation. The colors formed a pattern, escalation over time, building from subtle exclusions to blatant demands. Yesterday's announcement, in front of 60 witnesses, claiming you'd agreed to something you hadn't, that's the crown jewel. It demonstrates intent, pattern of behavior, and most importantly, it gives us leverage. Leverage for what? I don't want to sue my own son. You don't have to, but Sophia needs to understand that her behavior has consequences, and Marcus needs to wake up before he loses his mother permanently. Grace pulled up a new document, a letter, professionally formatted on her firm's letterhead. This is a cease and desist. It formally notifies Sophia that any future public statements regarding your property, finances, or living arrangements without your explicit written consent will be considered defamation and harassment. It documents the pattern of behavior. It establishes a legal record. "Grace, this will destroy my relationship with Marcus." "Aunt Elle, what relationship? The one where he stands silent while his wife humiliates you. The one where he allows her to announce you've agreed to things you haven't. The one where your home and resources are treated like community property available for their use." She wasn't wrong, but the truth still tasted like ash. "There's more." Grace pulled another document. "I've prepared a comprehensive asset protection plan. Irrevocable trust for Hayes Strategic. Updated property deed with transfer on death clause to the Marine Corps Scholarship Fund. Financial power of attorney to me in case of incapacity. Every legal protection to ensure that if something happens to you, Sophia and Marcus cannot access, control, or claim your assets." "This feels like war." "It is war. They started it. We're just making sure you don't lose." I thought about Patricia's words, about losing a son who was already lost, about having only yourself left, but at least having that. What happens after we send this? One of three things. Option 1, Sophia backs down, Marcus wakes up, they start treating you with actual respect. Option 2, they escalate, we have documentation, and we respond legally if necessary. Option 3, they cut contact, you grieve, but you maintain your dignity and financial security. All three options involve losing them in some way. Yes, but right now you're losing them while also losing yourself. At least this way, you keep your power. I looked out the window. The harbor stretched below, dotted with sailboats and naval vessels. Somewhere out there, Benjamin had flown missions, protected freedom, believed in honor and duty, and doing what was right even when it was hard. He would have hated this, would have wanted me to find a softer way, a path that kept family intact. But Benjamin wasn't here, and the family I was trying to keep intact had already broken long before I acknowledged the cracks. Send the letter. Grace's expression showed approval. Already drafted, just needed your approval. She hit send, and I watched the email disappear into the digital void, carrying with it the formal declaration that Eleanor Hayes would no longer be silent about her own erasure. The response came faster than expected, not from Sophia, from Marcus. He called that night while I was making dinner, just pasta and salad, comfort food that required minimal thought. I let it ring 3 times before answering, needing those seconds to prepare. Mom. One word, my title. Not a greeting, not warmth, just identification of who he was calling. Marcus. Did you seriously send Sophia a legal threat? A cease and desist letter? I sent her documentation of a pattern of behavior that needs to stop. The legal terminology might have been Grace's, but the message is mine. You're making this so much bigger than it needs to be. Sophia is pregnant, stressed, trying to plan for our future, and you're treating her like she's some kind of criminal. I'm treating her like someone who publicly announced I'd agreed to something I never agreed to. Who spent 18 months excluding me from family events, using my home and resources without asking, and pressuring me to make decisions about my life that serve her interests rather than mine. She's trying to include you. That's what moving in was about, making sure you're part of Benjamin's life instead of alone in that big house. Marcus, did you hear yourself just now? That big house, not your home. Not the house you and Dad built a life in. Just a big house that I'm alone in, like I'm some problem that needs solving rather than a person with my own life and choices. You're twisting my words. I'm hearing them clearly for the first time. And what I'm hearing is that you see me the way Sophia does, as someone whose value is measured by my usefulness to your life rather than my own autonomy. Silence, long enough that I checked to see if he'd hung up. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. Sophia is crying. She thinks you hate her. I don't hate her, Marcus. I don't trust her. There's a difference. Because she made one mistake, one announcement that got miscommunicated. Because she's made 18 months of choices that demonstrate she sees me as disposable until she needs something. And because you've enabled every single one of those choices by staying silent when you should have spoken up. So this is my fault. I'm the bad guy because I'm trying to keep peace between my wife and my mother. You're the bad guy because you're choosing peace over honesty, silence over integrity, comfort over courage. Benjamin taught you better than this. I taught you better than this. Don't bring Dad into this. He's already in it. You named your son after him. You're using his legacy to justify moving into his house. You're claiming his values while violating every principle he stood for. So yes, Marcus, I'm bringing him into this because maybe his memory will remind you of who you're supposed to be. The words came out harder than I intended. Sharper. But they'd been building for 18 months, compressed under layers of gracious silence and swallowed hurt, and now that they were flowing, I couldn't stop them. Dad would want us to be a family. Dad would want you to protect your mother from people who exploit her. He would want you to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. He would want you to be a man who keeps his spine intact even when his wife wants him to bend. That's not fair. Neither is any of this. But fair stopped mattering the moment Sophia announced our living arrangement to 60 people without asking me first. Now we're in crisis management territory, and I'm managing it the only way I know how, by establishing boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. So the boundaries include legal threats. The boundaries include documentation, protection, making sure that the next time Sophia decides what I've allegedly agreed to, there's a paper trail proving otherwise. Marcus exhaled. I could picture him, phone pressed to his ear, probably in the garage or somewhere Sophia couldn't hear, trying to navigate loyalty between the woman he married and the one who raised him. Mom, I love you, but I love Sophia too, and I can't choose. I'm not asking you to choose, sweetheart. I'm asking you to see, to recognize what's happening, to acknowledge that love without respect is manipulation wearing a prettier name. I have to go. Marcus, I'll call you when things calm down, when we can talk without lawyers and accusations and all this anger. I'm not angry, I'm hurt. There's a difference. But he'd already hung up. Patricia left the next morning, flying back to North Carolina with promises to call weekly and instructions to not let them grind you down. I drove her to the airport, hugged her goodbye at departures, watched her disappear into the terminal before sitting in my car and finally letting the tears come. Not gentle tears, the ugly kind. The kind that comes from losing something you didn't realize was already gone until the absence hit you all at once. Grace called that afternoon. Sophia's lawyer contacted me. She wants to meet. Mediation. Says she's willing to discuss mutual understanding and moving forward productively. Translation. She wants to negotiate without admitting wrongdoing. Probably, but it means the cease and desist worked. She's scared. Or at least, she's realized that you're not going to be silent anymore. When? Next week. Her lawyer, my firm, neutral location. You don't have to attend if you don't want to. I can represent your interests. I thought about it. About letting Grace handle everything while I stayed home and avoided confrontation. About taking the easy path that kept me comfortable and Sophia at arm's length. But comfortable had gotten me 18 months of humiliation. Comfortable had cost me my son's respect. Comfortable was the luxury of people who hadn't yet learned that silence, when wielded strategically, required showing up to witness your own power. I'll be there. The mediation took place in a conference room on the 18th floor of Grace's law firm, neutral territory with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Diego Bay. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in charcoal gray, professional, composed, the visual equivalent of someone who'd already won and was simply here to formalize terms. Grace met me in the lobby, her expression carefully neutral in that lawyer way that meant she was preparing for battle, but didn't want to telegraph strategy. Sophia's attorney is Robert Chen. No relation to us, unfortunately. He's good, specializes in family mediation, very smooth, excellent at making unreasonable demands sound like compromises. Don't let him charm you. I spent 30 years dealing with colonels who thought charm was the same as competence. I'll manage. We took the elevator in silence. Grace scrolled through her tablet, making final notes on whatever documentation she'd prepared. I watched the floor numbers climb and tried not to think about the fact that I was about to sit across from my son and negotiate the terms of our relationship like it was a business contract. The conference room was aggressively neutral, beige walls, generic landscape art, a table large enough to seat 12 but set for 6. Sophia sat on the far side with her attorney, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my car payment. Marcus sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in khakis and a polo shirt, like he'd been pulled from weekend errands for this meeting he clearly didn't want to attend. Sophia was 9 months pregnant now, due any day according to the timeline Grace had pulled from social media. She wore a flowing dress in pale pink, her hand resting on her belly in that protective gesture that had become her signature pose. Vulnerable, maternal, deserving of consideration. I took my seat across from them, Grace beside me, and watched Marcus's eyes meet mine for half a second before darting away. Shame or anger, I couldn't tell which. Robert Chen opened with pleasantries designed to establish his reasonable person credentials. Thank you for coming. We appreciate everyone's willingness to find common ground. Family matters are always sensitive, but surely we can reach mutual understanding. Grace cut through it with surgical precision. Mr. Chen, let's establish parameters. We're here because your client has engaged in a documented pattern of financial exploitation, public defamation, and harassment of Mrs. Hayes. The cease and desist letter outlined specific behaviors that must stop. Has your client reviewed that letter? Sophia's attorney maintained his smile. We have concerns about the characterization of events. Mrs. Hayes, Sophia, feels that certain misunderstandings have been weaponized into legal threats that are disproportionate to innocent miscommunications. Innocent miscommunications, Grace repeated, her voice flat. Is that what we're calling public announcements that Eleanor had agreed to housing arrangements she'd never consented to? Celebrations held in her home without permission. Pressure to relocate to senior facilities. Eleanor was consulted about all these matters, perhaps memory. I'm 58 years old, Mr. Chen, not 88. My memory is excellent. I kept my voice level, professional. And I have documentation proving that every major decision Sophia claimed I agreed to was either fabricated or grossly misrepresented. Sophia leaned forward, eyes glistening. Eleanor, I never meant to hurt you. If I misunderstood our conversations, I'm sorry. But you have to understand, I'm about to have a baby, your grandchild. I was trying to build a family, not exclude you from it. The performance was good. Tears threatening but not falling. Voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. The pregnant woman being attacked by her unreasonable mother-in-law. But I'd spent 3 decades reading people who'd trained to deceive. Sophia was talented, but she wasn't that good. You were trying to acquire my home without paying for it. There's a difference between building family and building equity at someone else's expense. Robert Chen's expression flickered, surprise, maybe, that I'd stated it so bluntly. Mrs. Hayes, I think we can all agree that family dynamics involve complex emotions. What Sophia is proposing is actually quite generous. She and Marcus would cover all household expenses, maintenance, property taxes. Eleanor would maintain ownership while enjoying family presence and security in her later years. Later years. As if 58 was the beginning of decline rather than the middle of a life I'd built deliberately. Mr. Chen, I appreciate that you're here to represent your client's interests, but let me be equally clear about mine. I have no intention of cohabiting with Sophia and Marcus. I have no intention of surrendering control of my home, my finances, or my daily life to make their housing situation more convenient. And I have significant concerns about any arrangement that requires me to relinquish autonomy in exchange for proximity to my grandchild. So you're choosing your house over your grandson. Sophia's voice had lost the trembling quality. Harder now, the mask slipping. I'm choosing my dignity over manipulation. If you want a relationship with me, if you want Benjamin Jr. to know his grandmother, that relationship will be built on respect, not extortion. Marcus finally spoke, his voice strained. Mom, nobody's trying to extort you. We just thought, Sophia's practice is struggling, the mortgage on our place is killing us, and you have all this space. It seemed like it would help everyone. The honesty was almost worse than Sophia's manipulation. My son admitting they were financially stressed, confirming that their interest in my home had nothing to do with family bonding and everything to do with solving problems they'd created by living beyond their means. Marcus, if you need financial help, ask for financial help. Don't disguise it as doing me a favor by filling my empty house with your presence. Don't announce publicly that I've agreed to things I haven't. Don't make your mother feel like her worth to you is measured by her usefulness in solving your problems. That's not fair. Neither is announcing my eviction at a baby shower. Neither is excluding me from family tables in my own home. Neither is spending 18 months treating me like I'm disposable until you need something from me. Grace pulled out her tablet, slid it across the table. On the screen, the spreadsheet, 18 months of documentation in color-coded rows. This is what we're actually here to discuss. Not Eleanor's willingness to be generous. She's been generous to the tune of $24,000 in hosting events, she wasn't fully included in. What we need from Sophia is acknowledgement that this pattern ends now. Robert Chen studied the spreadsheet, his professional composure cracking slightly. The documentation was thorough: dates, witnesses, financial records, screenshots of communications. Hard to argue with data. What are Mrs. Hayes's terms? Grace had prepared this part carefully. We'd spent 2 days refining language, making sure every demand was reasonable but firm. 1. No future public statements about Eleanor's property, finances, or living situation without her explicit written consent. 2. No hosting of events at Eleanor's home without formal invitation issued by Eleanor herself. 3. Recognition that Marcus's inheritance has been restructured, with the majority of Eleanor's estate designated for charitable purposes. 4. Establishment of clear boundaries regarding childcare, visits, and involvement in Benjamin Jr.'s life, to be negotiated in good faith after a 3-month cooling-off period. 3 months? Sophia's hand moved protectively over her belly. You're telling me I can't see my mother-in-law for 3 months after giving birth, that my son won't know his grandmother. I'm telling you that 18 months of toxicity requires time to heal. 3 months gives everyone space to reassess, reflect, and potentially rebuild on healthier foundations. This is insane. Marcus, are you going to let her do this? Marcus looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something besides avoidance in his eyes. Pain. Real pain. The kind that comes from recognizing you've hurt someone you love and can't immediately fix it. Mom, please, the baby's due in 2 weeks. Sophia's scared, I'm scared. Can't we figure this out like family? We can, but family means respect, Marcus. It means honest conversations instead of public manipulations. It means recognizing that I'm a person with my own life, not a resource to be managed for your convenience. The room fell silent except for the ambient hum of the building's ventilation system. Outside the window, a sailboat crossed the bay, white sails brilliant against blue water. Life continuing normally while we negotiated the terms of ours. Robert Chen cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, allow everyone to consider options. Grace nodded. 15 minutes. Sophia and her attorney left the room. Marcus stayed, which surprised me. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight with tension. Grace glanced at me, a silent question. Do you want privacy? I nodded. She gathered her materials and stepped out, leaving me alone with my son for the first time since the baby shower. You really restructured your will. Not a question. A statement heavy with realization. I did. Because of Sophia. Because of the pattern I was enabling by staying silent. Because I needed to protect myself from a situation that was getting progressively worse. He turned from the window, and I saw Benjamin in his face. The same sharp intelligence, the same struggle between what felt right emotionally and what was right strategically. I didn't know it was that bad. The exclusions, the way she talked to you. I thought you were okay with it because you never said anything. I was raised to be gracious, to not cause scenes, to handle difficult situations with composure and dignity. What I'm learning, far too late, is that grace without boundaries becomes a weapon other people use against you. She's not a bad person, Mom. She grew up with nothing. Worked her way through med school, built a practice from scratch. She sees security differently than we do because she's never had it. And that's admirable, Marcus, truly. But her insecurity doesn't give her permission to exploit my security. Her difficult past doesn't justify making my present difficult. He sat down across from me, the same seat Sophia had occupied minutes earlier. Without her there, he looked younger. More like the boy I'd raised than the man who'd spent 18 months disappointing me. I love her. I know that's not enough right now, but I do. And I'm going to be a father in 2 weeks, and I have no idea how to do this. How to be loyal to my wife and fair to my mother, and raise a kid when my own family is falling apart. My heart cracked, because this was the Marcus I knew. The one who felt deeply, worried constantly, tried to fix everything and everyone. The one who'd been taught by Benjamin that protecting people was love's highest expression, and by me that duty sometimes required sacrifice. Sweetheart, you don't have to choose between us, but you do have to stop allowing Sophia to make choices for you about our relationship. Every time she excludes me and you stay silent, you're choosing her comfort over my dignity. Every time she speaks for you instead of you speaking for yourself, you're giving away your autonomy. She says you hate her, that you've never accepted her, never given her a real chance. I gave her 18 months of chances, 18 months of gracious silence while she systematically erased me from your life. What I won't give her is my home, my financial security, and my self-respect. If she interprets boundaries as hatred, that's her issue to work through, not mine to accommodate. Marcus rubbed his face, exhausted. What do you want from me? Specifically, what would fix this? It was the first time he'd asked. Not what Sophia wanted, not what would keep peace, what would fix the damage between us. I want you to see me, not as an obstacle or a resource or a problem to manage, as your mother. A person who loves you unconditionally but can't accept being treated like I'm conditionally valuable based on my usefulness. I do see you. Then prove it. Tell Sophia that my boundaries are non-negotiable, that our relationship will be rebuilt on respect or not at all, that you married her, but you don't disappear into her narrative of how the world should work. And if she can't accept that, then you have a marriage problem, not a mother problem. But either way, I can't keep sacrificing myself to make your choices easier. He stood, walked back to the window. The baby's name, Benjamin Marcus Hayes Jr. We should have asked if you were okay with it. The admission surprised me. Thank you for recognizing that. Sophia chose it. She thought it would honor Dad, make you happy. But now I'm wondering if it was more about claiming legitimacy. Like naming him after his grandfather would give us permission to claim his grandfather's house. The insight was painful in its accuracy. Does it matter now? The baby's almost here. His name is set. It matters because you're right. I've been letting Sophia make decisions without questioning her motives. And our son deserves better than being named as part of a strategy. Before I could respond, Grace knocked softly and opened the door. They're ready to resume. Continuing with mediation resolution, birth, 1-month separation, practice collapse, move-in proposal, and final year later scene, maintaining timeline consistency. Baby born July 2024, move-in August 2024, final scene August 2025. Sophia returned with Robert Chen, her face composed but eyes red-rimmed. She'd been crying, real tears this time, not performance. Marcus took his seat beside her but didn't take her hand. The distance between them was subtle but noticeable. Robert Chen spoke first. We've discussed Eleanor's terms. Sophia is willing to accept the boundaries regarding property and finances. She requests modification of the 3-month separation. Would 1 month be acceptable? Given the baby's imminent arrival, extended separation seems unduly harsh. Grace looked at me. The decision was mine. I thought about Benjamin, about what he would want. Not for me to surrender, but to find the path that preserved possibility without sacrificing principle. 1 month with conditions. No visits to my home during that period, all meetings on neutral ground or at Marcus and Sophia's place. No social media posts about me, positive or negative. No discussions of our relationship with third parties beyond what's necessary for Marcus to explain the situation to people who ask. And after 1 month, we reassess based on whether the boundaries have been respected. That's reasonable, Robert Chen said, relief evident in his voice. Sophia's jaw tightened. So I have to pretend you don't exist for a month, after I just gave birth. You have to give me space to heal from 18 months of damage. If you can manage 1 month of respecting boundaries, perhaps we can build something better afterward. And if I can't, if I think this is ridiculous and controlling, then we extend to 3 months as originally proposed, or longer, your choice. The power dynamic had shifted. Sophia, accustomed to getting her way through charm or manipulation or strategic vulnerability, was facing someone who'd stopped caring about her approval and started caring about her own peace. Marcus spoke quietly. Sophia, just agree. Please, let's take the month, have the baby, figure things out without lawyers and threats and all this poison. She looked at him like he'd betrayed her. You're supposed to be on my side. I am, but I'm also on Mom's side, and on our son's side. And right now, those things don't all point the same direction, so I'm trying to find a path that doesn't destroy everything. Fine, the word came out bitter. 1 month, but I'm not promising anything after that. I'm not asking for promises, I said. Just compliance with basic boundaries. We'll see what happens from there. Grace pulled out contracts she'd prepared, legal documentation of the terms we'd agreed to. Everyone signed. The mediation ended with handshakes that felt more like truces than resolutions. Marcus walked me to the elevator, Sophia and her attorney already gone. Mom, I'm sorry, for all of it. For not seeing what was happening, for not standing up sooner, for letting things get this bad. I know, sweetheart. And I'm sorry, too, for not speaking up earlier, for enabling the pattern by staying silent, for letting 18 months pass before I drew these lines. When the baby comes, I'll send you a photo. Not a visit, just, I want you to know he exists, that he's your grandson even if things are complicated. I'd like that very much. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside, turned to face him as the doors began to close. Marcus, love without respect is just manipulation with better marketing. Remember that. The doors closed on his stricken face. Benjamin Marcus Hayes Jr. was born 3 days later, July 18th, 2024 at 2:47 a.m., weighing 7 pounds, 11 ounces. Marcus sent a photo at dawn, a tiny, wrinkled face, eyes closed, wrapped in a hospital blanket with blue and pink stripes. The text that accompanied it was simple. He's here. He's perfect. Thank you for giving us space to figure this out. I sat on my deck watching sunrise paint the Pacific in shades of rose and gold, looking at my grandson's face, and felt something crack open in my chest that had been sealed shut for months. Love, complicated, messy, painful love for a child I hadn't met, born to a son I was trying not to lose, welcomed into a family that was still broken but maybe, possibly, beginning to heal. I didn't respond immediately. The 1-month boundary meant exactly that. No contact, no visits, no crossing lines we'd just established. But I saved the photo, looked at it a dozen times that first day, showed it to Grace when she came by that evening with Thai food and congratulations. He looks like Marcus, Grace observed. He looks like Benjamin, my Benjamin. Same nose, same chin. It's like seeing ghosts made flesh. Are you okay? I don't know. I'm a grandmother. To a child I can't see. In a family that's held together by legal agreements instead of trust. How am I supposed to feel about that? Grace poured wine. Good wine. The kind you save for moments that need numbing or celebrating, and you're not sure which. You're supposed to feel however you feel. Sad and happy and angry and hopeful all at once, probably. Human emotions don't follow legal boundaries. The month passed slowly. I threw myself into Hayes Strategic, taking on 2 new contracts that required intensive analysis. Grace checked in daily. Patricia called from North Carolina weekly, her voice a tether to the family I'd married into even if the family I'd created was still fractured. Social media became a minefield. Sophia posted constantly, baby photos, motherhood reflections, carefully curated images of her new family, never tagging me, never mentioning me, following the letter of our agreement while violating its spirit. Marcus posted less, but when he did, the photos showed exhaustion and joy in equal measure. A man learning fatherhood in real time. I stayed silent, honored the boundaries even when they felt like exile. 3 weeks into the month, Sophia's medical practice imploded. A former patient filed a lawsuit, medical malpractice, complications from a procedure Sophia performed. The California Medical Board launched an investigation. 2 more patients came forward. The practice closed within days. The expensive lifestyle, the La Jolla Shores mortgage, all built on revenue that had suddenly stopped. They're going to lose the house, Grace told me over coffee. Marcus's salary can't cover the mortgage alone. They've got maybe 3 months before foreclosure. And you're telling me this because? Because Sophia's going to come back, desperate this time, and you need to decide now what you're willing to offer and what you're not. The call came 4 days later. Marcus. Mom, I need to talk to you. In person. Can I come to the house? The 1-month period had 2 days left, but his voice carried genuine desperation without manipulation underneath. Come by tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. He arrived exactly on time, looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles, clothes rumpled. I made coffee. We sat on the deck. Sophia's practice is done. The lawsuits, even if she's eventually cleared, her reputation is destroyed. We're 3 months from losing the house. I heard, I'm sorry, Marcus, that's devastating. What does Sophia want to do? She wants to move in here, says it's the obvious solution. And what do you want to do? The question seemed to surprise him. I want my son to have a home. I want my wife to stop crying. I want my mother to not hate me. I don't hate you, Marcus. We sat in silence. Waves crashed below. If I said yes, and I'm not saying I am, what would it look like? What would you do differently? Marcus pulled out his phone. I wrote this last night, boundaries. Sophia hasn't seen it yet. The document was thorough. Separate living spaces, split utilities, Sophia's office in the garage, Marcus responsible for childcare, no assumption of babysitting, monthly meetings. 6-month trial with option to terminate. Who helped you write it? No one. I've been watching you stand up for yourself, so I'm learning. The question is whether Sophia will agree. She'll have to. The alternative is bankruptcy and moving to her parents in Arizona. She'd rather die than admit failure to her family. The bitterness in his voice suggested something had shifted. What changed between mediation and now? Becoming a father, watching her with Benjamin, realizing the way she treats people when she wants something is different from when she doesn't need them. The admission cost him. Love doesn't require blindness. You can love Sophia and acknowledge her flaws. I don't know if she can change. That's what the 6-month trial would show you. If I bring her back here, will you be okay? I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you enforce the boundaries. If you promise my home doesn't become her kingdom again. I promise. If she violates the terms, we leave. No second chances. Marcus stood, hugged me fiercely. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me. That's what mothers do. The formal proposal arrived 2 days later. 15 pages. Sophia and Marcus both signed. Grace reviewed it and pronounced it solid. If they violate this, you have grounds for immediate eviction. And if it works, then maybe you get your family back. Different, but back. They moved in on a Saturday in late August 2024. Professional movers. By evening, they were installed in the East Wing. I met Benjamin for the first time that night. Sophia brought him to the living room, placed him in my arms. He's your grandson. You should hold him. The baby was warm, solid. I saw Benjamin's nose, Marcus's chin, my mother's eyes. Family written in features too small to have personality yet. Hello, Benjamin. I'm your grandmother. We're going to figure this out. The baby made a small sound. Sophia took him back, disappeared into their wing. Marcus lingered. Thank you for this. I'm doing it for you and for him, for the possibility that family can be rebuilt with better foundations. The first month passed in careful choreography. We orbited each other, close enough to affect gravity but far enough to maintain separate trajectories. Sophia rebuilt her practice as a consultant. Marcus worked long hours. Benjamin grew. I helped when asked, holding him while Sophia showered, watching him sleep. But I never assumed, never overstepped. Grace visited monthly. You look different, lighter. I feel clearer, like I know where I stand. It's not perfect, but it's honest. The breakthrough came 3 months in. I found Sophia crying in the kitchen at 2 a.m., Benjamin asleep in her arms. I don't know how to do this, any of it. I poured tea, sat across from her, offered presents. When Marcus was born, I cried every day for 3 weeks. Benjamin, my Benjamin, told me competence isn't the same as ease. Struggling doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. You must hate having me here. I don't hate you, Sophia. I don't trust you completely, not yet. But I don't hate you. How do I earn it, the trust? Keep respecting boundaries. Keep being honest. Keep letting Marcus be himself. Maybe eventually we build something real. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. For the shower, the announcements, all of it. I was so focused on what I wanted that I never considered what you needed. Thank you for saying that. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement was where healing began. 1 year later, August 2025, I stood on the same deck where this story began, watching Marcus play with Benjamin, 14 months old now, walking unsteadily, laughing at seagulls. Sophia's consulting practice had stabilized. They'd saved enough to start looking at homes, smaller within their means. Marcus had been promoted. The contracts signed a year ago were still in place, still followed. Grace joined me, carrying champagne. To surviving family. To building something better than survival. We drank. Below, Benjamin squealed as a wave rushed toward his feet. Marcus scooped him up, and their shared laughter carried on the wind. You know what I learned? I said finally. Being dismissed was never about them not seeing me. It was about me not demanding to be seen. The moment I started claiming my own visibility, everything changed. That's the whole story, isn't it? You were never disposable. You just stopped accepting being treated that way. Patricia's voice echoed. You'll never be invisible if you own your choices. I'd spent 58 years learning that lesson. 18 months unlearning silence that protected but also diminished me. The last year proving boundaries weren't walls, they were foundations. Marcus looked up, caught my eyes, smiled. I smiled back. Family. Complicated, messy, built on contracts and compromises and stubborn refusal to give up. Not perfect, but mine. Finally, completely, unmistakably mine.